I know, but I forgot. Thanks. Okay.
5 seconds to live stream, and then I will put the video on and you can see it all.
Yeah, looking for it. Welcome, everyone, to our second virtual live stream play reading event brought to you by Fourth Line Theatre and Trent University's Trail College's 2021 Young Company. Tonight's reading of Beverley Cooper's play Innocence Lost is directed by Brianna Hill. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that I'm live streaming to you tonight from Treaty 20 Michi-Sagig territory in the traditional territories of the Michi-Sagig and the Chippewa Nations, known as the Williams Treaty First Nations, which includes Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island. The area in which we are standing right now is called Nojijiwanon, Ojibwe, for place at the end of the rapids. The shores of the Odainabe River, which is just 3 or 4 blocks from where I am right now, was a gathering place for Indigenous people. Odainabe, or Otonabe, means river that beats like a heart. We respect the treaties of peace and friendship and are thankful for the generosity of the Anishinaabe people in sharing their lands with us. We would like to pay our respects to the elders past and present, and we would like to acknowledge that the Williams Treaty First Nations are stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters, and that they continue to maintain and carry out this responsibility for those of us here now and for future generations. Secondly, I would like to acknowledge our season sponsors, Nexicom, for their continued support of Fourth Line Theatre, and Exit Realty Liftlock as our major sponsor. I would also like to thank Michael Eamon and Trail College for being so accommodating and allowing us to work in their beautiful space. And a big thank you to Jeff Bemrose for all your amazing help with all of our sound. Thank you. Be sure to follow our social media, e-blasts, and visit our website to register for our upcoming events. The Young Company will be presenting readings and performances every Friday evening at 7 p.m., now until August 6th. And on that note, I would like to turn it over to the Young Company. Enjoy the show.
Hi, my name is Madison Short. I'll be playing Isabella Bordez, Woman from Base, Miss Harper, and Hayes.
Hi, my name is Lauren Sequiner. I will be playing Lynn, Karen Dom, George, Stoner, Nurse, and Caroline.
Hi, my name is Lucas Bronk, and I'll be playing Mr. Harper, Harold Graham, Local Man, Boy, and Jim.
Hi, I'm Maud Rose Craig, and I'm playing Trudy, Jocelyn, Hobbs, Barbara, and Richard Gelatley.
Hi, my name is Kate Bemrose, and I'm playing Mother, Brown Owl, Dr. Penistine, Darlene, Dougie Oates, Bob Lawson, and Nancy.
Hi, my name is Freddie Milner, and I'll be playing Sarah from ages 13 to 45.
Hello, my name is Hussein Halia. I'm playing for the father, Dan Trescott, Ref Bagnall, and the teacher.
Hi, my name is Alex Bemrose. I'll be playing Drew's son and Stephen Trescott.
Hi, my name is Emma Kamovich, and I will be playing Doris Trescott, Butch, George, Maggie, and John.
Hi, my name is Muhammad Abdullah, and I'm playing for Ken, Garden Log, LAC, Ledger, Register, Oliver, Lawyer, and Son.
Innocence Lost by Beverley Cooper.
Hey, Steven, catch.
Yeah, go long.
Hey, Steven!
Yeah, here.
Jocelyn! Summertime! Coming!
Can I play with you? Hey,
Steven! Yeah, let's Jocelyn!
Okay.
Yeah, here.
I was 13 years old. I didn't think much about adults then. It was like we were in our own perfect world. Long sunny days of freedom and adventure interrupted only by mandatory school attendance. I had one foot in childhood with a hula hoop twirling around my waist. My other foot was walking steadily towards growing up. The world of boys and makeup and imagining what life would bring. And when I imagined the future, it was wonderful. I planned to have several well-behaved children, a perfect husband, and a pretty house in town that looked like it had popped out of a storybook. My biggest worry back then was if my best friend Trudy was going to sit beside me at lunch.
When you look back on these days and think of your life as young people, you'll want to live it all over again.
Mom.
Childhood is the most precious and beautiful time of life.
This is my view of what happened, how I remember it.
RCAF Clinton was a training base for radar and communications, holding a couple thousand airmen, their families, and other folks that worked there. It was located just out of the town of Clinton in Tuckersmith Township.
My family lived on a farm the other side of Loudonsboro. For a couple of years, my brother and I were bused into school on the base.
Oh yeah, the AVN, Hugh Campbell School. Later, our kids went to high school in Clinton. My husband sometimes went to the base for work purposes, but otherwise, we didn't have much to do with the folks who lived there. They were transients, and there was no point in getting to know and be friends with people who lived or are going to move on in a year or two. Our family had lived in the Huron County from the beginning of time, or just about, and now that the base brought a lot of money into the area, so I guess you would call it a necessary evil.
It was so hot that June. Temperatures up in the 80s. Couldn't concentrate in school, couldn't wait for the summer holidays. They weren't far off, only a couple of weeks. After supper, it was still light for ages, so sometimes I'd ride my bike over to a friend's house. It always seemed like every kid for miles would zoom around on their bikes or scooters or on foot. We went anywhere we wanted. That was because everyone knew who we were. It was hard to get into trouble.
Sometimes I rode around over the Bayview River, and someone I knew always was there, swimming or fishing. I liked looking for turtles, spotted turtles mostly. They'd get hooked on kids' fishing rods, and I'd rescue them.
I'd put the turtles in my bike carrier and take them home.
Here's the lay of the land. There's the base with the school on it. If you take the county road north from the base, you pass Bob Lawson's farm and the bush. Cross over the bridge over the river and arrive at the highway. If you turn left at the highway, you get to Clinton. If you turn right, you head towards Stratford.
The Harpers lived in a good-sized house, one of the PMQs, permanent married quarters. The father, Leslie, was a flying officer. He and his wife Shirley had 3 children. Lynn was the middle child. They lived on Victoria Boulevard. The Truscotts lived on Quebec Road in a much smaller house. It was according to rank what kind of house you got.
My husband Dan was a warrant officer, a non-commissioned officer. In fact, he was voted Man of the Year for his work with young people on the base. So it shows what kind of esteem people held him to. We had 4 children.
They were Catholic, weren't they?
I believe you're right.
Stephen was the second oldest.
I want to learn how to fly. Maybe be a pilot one day.
Stephen was popular with everyone, and every girl I knew had a crush on him at one time or another, including me. He was tall, good-looking, and nice. Very shy, quiet, except when he laughed. He had the cutest giggle. I used to sit in the back of the class and watch him surreptitiously through the fingers in my right hand. I was insanely jealous of Karen Allen because he liked her the most. At least, I thought he did. It was hard to tell because he was so shy. And he was more interested in sports than girls. I had this picture of him. Mom had taken it at the field day. It was actually of me holding a third for long jump, but for some reason Stephen was in the picture too. He had won all sorts of ribbons. He's got this big smile. When my mom got the photos back, I snuck that one out and kept it hidden in my room. I looked at it every day. I was in love, the way a 13-year-old can be, from afar.
He was always helping kids fix their bikes. He could fix anything. He was real handy.
There was a party at Lorraine Wood's house the Friday before. I wasn't allowed to go, but I heard all about it on Monday.
Lynn Harper asked Steve to the dance, and he did, but it really didn't mean anything. Lots of kids were dancing.
He told Lorraine he didn't care for Lynn and didn't like her following him around. She was 2 years younger than him. She was only 12. That was a lot at that age. Lynn was nice. I didn't really know her that well, to tell you the truth.
Lynn had a little scar on her lip. It was hardly noticeable, but she was a little self-conscious about it. It was tough for us base kids, moving around so much, hard to find your place, you know? I liked Lynn well enough, but I wasn't really drawn to her. Kathy Odell, she knew her better. They used to hitchhike into town and go shopping all the time.
She was bright and chatty, a live wire, sweet as anything.
Bit high and strong and moody, temperamental.
I heard that.
Lippy.
Let's just say the morals on base are as loose as an alley cat's. All those single men drinking and causing trouble. I heard that there was a club of young girls.
That is gossip and hearsay. We're not going to bring that up.
What did you hear?
I'm just telling you, don't get too chummy with those base kids.
Mom, they're way better behaved than most kids. If they get in trouble, their dads get a black mark on his record and won't get promoted.
You don't know everything.
It was Tuesday, June 9, 1959.
After school, I played baseball, and Mom had to pick me up because the bus had already left. Lynn was at the baseball game, too. Then I had dinner. I think it was potato salad and cold chicken. I washed the dishes and fed the dog and did my homework. I had a good book I was reading. We had a hammock in the back of the house that swung between 2 old elms, so I climbed into that hammock. My brother gave me grief about not having to do more chores, and then I swatted mosquitoes and read. It seemed like any other night. The crickets were chirping away, the breeze coming from the lake, and nice smells from the peonies that were in bloom. Of course, that could have been the night before or the night before that. The days all kind of blended in together. but we had to stay where we were that night, and that's what stuck in my head.
I remember exactly what I was doing. My husband was worried about the engine on one of the tractors, so we went outside to fiddle around with the oil and wrenches and got his best work clothes all grimy. I had planned to go pick strawberries with a friend who lived on the other side of the base, but instead I was doing laundry before the grease set. I might have been driven right down that county road and been caught up in the whole thing.
Lynn came home at 5:30. Her father and I had supper, and we had taken our tea in the living room. Lynn had her supper, boiled potatoes, canned peas, and turkey in the kitchen. She finished at approximately 5:45. Lynn then asked if she could go swimming at the pool. I told her to see if she could get a pass, but that didn't work out. So she did the dishes, then went off on foot in the direction of the public school. She was wearing a pair of greenish-blue shorts, a white blouse with red and blue and brown loafers. She had an Air Force locket around her neck. She'd been given it 3 weeks earlier by my sister.
On 5:15, Stephen Truscott came home from a baseball game. The 14-year-old boy played third base. He was a very good athlete. Football, volleyball, softball, good at them all. Supper wasn't ready yet, so he went outside to play. At 5:50, his mother said,
Steven! I need you to do something for me.
Sure.
We need coffee, a pound of nabob. You'll have to hurry. The store closes at 6.
He was back permanently with the coffee.
Mom, I ripped my pants.
How on earth did you do that?
On Bill's bike, I got scratched too.
I think you'll live. Your pants will do for tonight. Go on out and play for a few minutes until your supper's up.
Okay.
You going out tonight?
I might go to the quarry for a swim.
I need you home by 8:30. Your father and I may be going out to the mess. I'd like you to babysit.
What, isn't it Ken's turn?
Your brother babysat last.
Okay.
Steve went out after his supper on his bike. It was the most beautiful bike. A green racer with streamers, 3 speeds, and handbrakes. I think he got it for his birthday. He just rode around on the roads, down by the river, across the bridge, ending up at the school where his pals were.
You're going swimming in the river tonight?
No, I don't think so. I might come down later though.
At around 6:35, Lynn arrived at the school. Outside on the grounds, the brown owl was organizing a scavenger hunt for the Clinton brownies.
Do you need some help?
Can you stay for a bit?
I don't need to be home for a while. My mom's mad at me anyway.
Oh, can you organize the girls, 5 to a team?
Sure.
Not too much later, a boy came by on his bike. It was Stephen Truscott. Lynn went over and sat on the front of his wheel, and they chatted for a bit. Lynn did most of the talking, and then they left together.
My name's Richard Gelatley. That night I was down by the creek and wanted to go swimming. So I was biking along the county road going home to get my trunks, and they passed me. Stephen riding his bike and Lynn sitting on the crossbars. I was heading south. It was around 7:25. It could be a few minutes out, though.
Lots of kids were out that night. It was so hot. Some down at the bridge, fishing, swimming, wading in the river, whatever. And most nights it would have been the same, so some of the kids wouldn't have taken too much notice where they were and who they saw and what time it was, though most knew what time they had to be home.
I was hanging around the swings of the school with Lorraine and a few others. Steve arrived on his bike about 8:15. He rode up to the group and was talking to us, joking with his brother Ken. He acted normal, the way he always did. Steven was home at 8:25. He was pleased with himself with 5 minutes to spare.
I made it, Mom.
Yep, you're lucky. I went and put my earrings on and gave some last-minute instructions, and then Dan and I went out to the sergeant's lounge with the neighbors. When we got home, Stephen was sound asleep. I had to wake his younger brother to go to the bathroom, so I noticed that.
Lynn was supposed to be home by 9, but she wasn't, and it was getting later. I went out looking for her. My older boy went out too. We were worried, of course, and at about 11:15, I went to the NCO in charge of our police. After speaking to him, I went to the guardhouse and reported it.
Lane Harper, age 12 years old, 5 foot 3 inches tall, 100 pounds, white blueprint blues, blue shirt, hasn't been home since 1900 hours, possibly hitchhiking to grandmother's in Port Stanley. Early in the morning, search by OPP and Air Force personnel was began. They looked in the barns and vacant houses in the area. By this time, her family was understandably anxious for her safety.
The next morning, early, I started asking folks if they had seen her.
I was in the kitchen. May I help you?
I was wondering if your boys had seen Lynn.
Lynn who?
Lynn Harper.
Ken, have you seen Lynn Harper?
No.
Steven,
Yeah, I gave her a lift on my bike.
come here.
Try and remember. When did you see her? Where did you give her a lift to?
I met her at the school after supper. She asked me to take her down the country road to Highway 8.
Did you take her?
I did, on my bike. I left her on the corner. I rode back to the bridge, and when I turned around, she was getting into a gray car. I was heading towards Seaforth.
Oh my
I
god.
hope nothing's happened to that little girl. I saw Steve and Lynn on the cycle, going going past the highway on the river. When I was swimming.
Are you making that up, Butch? Stephen and Lynn?
I heard she ran away. She was mad at her parents for not letting her go swimming.
Maybe she's hiding somewhere to get attention.
Our
Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
It was strange to see Lynn's empty desk. She sat right at the front, so it was there for all of us to see. We thought she was off on some grand adventure, that she would be back safe and sound any minute. In a lot of trouble, but okay. We trusted in things, believed in the safety of the world.
The OPP station in Gottridge sent a man to investigate the disappearance.
Stephen, I'm Constable Hobbs. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Are you aware Lynn Harper is missing?
Yes.
Did you give Lynn Harper a ride on your bicycle?
Yeah.
Where did you pick Lynn up?
Outside the school.
What time was it?
What time was it?
Officer Down to Stephen said it was between 7 and 7:30.
7 and 7:30? No, what Stephen actually said is that he gave Lynn a ride between 7:25 and 7:30.
It was on the record.
Yes, but the other police officer there remembered Steve saying that it was closer to 7:25. The later time makes a difference.
It basically says the same thing.
I could see the clock through a window in the kindergarten room. It was around 7:25.
The significance of time took on a whole new meaning. The difference of minutes. Time when you were unaccounted for. The night before, nobody was paying too much attention to the clocks, and now they were so important.
Did she say anything to you?
She said she knew the people in the little white house along the highway. She said she might go down to see the ponies. She said she had to be home by 8 or 8:30.
Where did you drop her off?
I took her to the highway, then I returned over the bridge.
Did you see Lynn again?
Yeah. When I got to the bridge, I looked back and saw her get into a car. I think it was a late model Chevrolet with a lot of chrome gray. Maybe a Bel Air. It looked like it had a yellow license plate.
How many people were in the car?
Well, there's no one in the back, but I'm not sure about the front.
They interviewed Stephen 7 times over the next few days, but Stephen's story remained the same except for a few more details.
Lynn said she was mad at her parents because they wouldn't take her to the swimming pool.
Anything else?
She was wearing a gold chain necklace. It had a RCAF crest on it.
And when you were riding down the road, did you see anyone else?
Yeah, I saw Butch, George, Dougie Oates, and Richard Gelatley.
I saw Stephen and Lynn on Tuesday night.
And you are?
Gordon Logan.
And?
I was fishing at the swimming hole when I saw Lynn and Stephen go across the bridge. She and Steve were riding double on Steve's bike going towards number 8 highway. And then a little bit later, Steve came back on by himself. He stopped at the bridge for a bit and then rode off.
What was that boy thinking of letting a 12-year-old girl off of the highway to go hitchhiking? I mean, really, what kind of boy does that?
Lots of kids get rides that way, Mom. He didn't think it was wrong.
I hope you don't.
I didn't know anything bad could happen.
I never knew of my daughter hitchhiking. Never.
If the girl wanted to see the ponies, then why in heaven's name didn't he give her a ride all the way there? It doesn't make sense.
Stephen didn't do anything wrong.
All right.
When Lynn didn't show up, there was this possibility, kind of lurking in the air, that something had happened to her. And kids were saying maybe Stephen had something to do with it.
I saw Steve go into the bush with Harper. They were looking for calves. Stephen just took her over to see the ponies. She's gone hitchhiking somewhere.
Did you hear about Stephen and Lynn? Is that true?
Butch, are you saying I took Lynn Harper into the woods?
No.
Cut it out, Butch. I mean it. It wasn't me. I wasn't with Lynn in the woods.
Stephen sounded threatening. He was upset.
I'd be upset too if someone was accusing me of something I didn't do.
The girl had been missing since Tuesday night. By Thursday, June 11th in the afternoon, we organized a search. 250 men from the base were sent to search the area around the county road and the highway from Clinton to Seaforth. The group was divided into two, each of 125. The first was to cover the area around Lawson's farm, all spread out in a line, 10 feet apart, covering every inch of ground, and walk slowly ahead, examining the ground around them as they went. There were 20 officers behind the NCOs, each in charge of a group, making sure they went in a line, making sure they made a thorough search of it. They started at about 1 o'clock, combing the buildings, the fields, and the area known as Lawson's Bush. The trick was to look under every bush, every tree, and not let the line be broken.
Here she is!
Someone came and talked to our teacher, Mr. Edgar, and he told us everything was okay and sent us home. I thought Lynn was all right.
Sarah, go give the dog some water. I'll talk to you later.
They found Lynn Harper under the trees, laying on her back, naked, except for her undershirt. She's been raped and murdered.
Oh my god, no.
Her blues raped and used to strangle her. There were marks on her, and her body was bruised. About a tablespoon of blood was found under her left shoulder, where she had a gash. There was a scratch some 20 inches long, down front of her leg, from her thigh down to her ankle. Her socks, shirt, shoes, and hair band had been neatly placed beside her.
I don't know how the Harpers managed to continue. I guess you do what you have to, especially with other children to care for, but she was 12 years old. It's your worst nightmare as a parent. Not even a nightmare, it's the unimaginable. Hell on earth, we can never know what it was like to be in their shoes, never.
3 branches from nearby's plain of ash had been laying across the body.
It always seems so cold when they tell it. The newspapers, and then the lawyers, and then the books. Like her death was just a pile of details to be examined. She was a living, breathing, 12-year-old child. She was a good girl.
There were some marks on the earth where the dirt had pushed back, below her feet, but the ground didn't hold a lot of blues. No sign of struggle, no signs of the attacker.
Nothing prepares you for a sight like that. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't bear the sight of the poor young girl lying there like that. So we took off our coats and covered her up. We searched the area for evidence and waited for Peniston.
Dr. John Lolaine Peniston, the pathologist from Stratford. He has been the pathologist there for 10 years and was highly regarded.
I arrived at the woodlot at approximately 5:15 in the afternoon. I was conducted into the woodlot by Flight Lieutenant Brooks, the medicine officer at the base, who knew the girl well in life and had identified the body as Lynn Harper. I examined the child and we collected the samples from the surroundings. From examining the area around and later findings the autopsy, I came to the conclusion that death took place where the body was found. The body was then transported to the undertaker in Clinton, where the autopsy was conducted.
The room was small, with just standard floor lamplight for lighting.
Dr. Brooks assisted me. We were able to extract the stomach contents, which we were then delivered to the Attorney General's laboratory the following day. I determined that the cause of death was strangulation.
Mom? Is Lynn home now? Is she all right?
Have you finished your homework?
What were you and Daddy talking about? Something happened to her, hasn't it?
Lynn is dead, Sarah.
What?
She's been murdered.
She's dead?
Hush now.
They found her dead?
Lawson's bush.
Who'd want to hurt Lynn?
Some crazy person.
They'll catch whoever did this right quick.
We originally suspected someone from a town or a vagrant passing through. It certainly wasn't an airman. The Brass were determined to catch this killer. All the men were determined that we'd catch whoever did this heinous crime and deal with him in the most severe way possible.
I've always said, when you've got hundreds of single men running around this place, it's gonna cause trouble.
Now that is generalization.
Is it? I hear that one of those men from Seaforth got somebody pregnant, and about 2 days after, found out that man transferred out of here like a scared jackrabbit. I bet you it's one of those men on the base that's done this, and I hope he hangs.
One day Lynn was joking around with us, and the next day she was gone. Could it have been me? Could I have been the one that was killed by some crazy person?
No, she was not like you. She was one of them.
Okay then, all right now.
Don't okay me.
She's dead?
Raped and murdered.
Raped?
We'll talk about it later.
Strangled with her own shirt.
No, I don't believe you. I don't. You're wrong. It was the kind of thing that happened in other places, big cities. It was the end of our childhood, the death of our innocence. From that moment on, everything changed.
$10,000 dead or alive for killer of Lynn Harper.
It was the biggest reward ever offered by the Attorney General's department in any case. And if someone took the law into their own hands, I guess that would have been all right.
We were beside ourselves. A killer was on the loose. A killer who had raped and murdered a young girl, one of our own. We held our children close that night, I tell you. There, but for the grace of God.
I was so relieved when Inspector Graham arrived from the OPP in Toronto. He was the best there was. He solved all sorts of murder cases. I hoped he'd close this case fast so we could breathe again.
Generally speaking, the role of the investigator is to uncover the facts about an occurrence with the objective of discovering, as accurately as possible, What actually did occur? How did it occur? When did it occur? Where did it occur? My first job in solving the murder of Lynn Harper was to speak to the police and RCF personnel and get up to speed on the case. Under close scrutiny, it was evident that many phases of Truscott's story did not agree with the statements of some witnesses, but to some extent did agree with other witnesses. He certainly warranted further questioning.
My name is Stephen Truscott. I am 14 years old. Lynn was in my class. I have known her for 1 or 2 years. I was going towards the river to see some of the boys who were going fishing. She asked if she could get a ride down to the highway. I took her to the number 8 and let her off. She asked if she could get off, and she got off. So then I went back to the bridge.
The bridge is significant. The bridge went over the river where the kids were fishing and swimming. If Stephen crossed the bridge with Lynn heading north toward the highway, then he's in the clear. But if he didn't cross the bridge, then they assume he took the girl into the bush.
You interested in girls?
Some.
Were you ever out with her?
No. There was no interest in her that way. She was sort of bossy in school. She didn't really appeal to boys.
I also interviewed some friends of the accused. Steve's chum Arnold George in particular.
We always called him Butch.
He was a bit of an outsider. His father was a butcher in the army, and this was an Air Force base.
Tell me about the evening of June 9th.
I had supper, and then I cut the lawn for Mrs. McDougall. I went to the swimming hole around 7. I was there for like 15 minutes, and then Lynn and Steve biked north.
Anything else?
I saw Jocelyn Gadet. She was looking for Lynn.
My name's Jocelyn Gaudette. I'm 13 years old and in grade 7. On June 9th, I went up to the county road at about 6:30 to meet Steve. We were going to go right on the right-hand side of the road near Lawson's Bush. Steve didn't show up, so I walked along the road with my bicycle. I walked down the laneway that went in along the bush. I didn't see any bicycles or hear any noises. I had a funny feeling, though.
This little girl, Jocelyn Gaudette, told us that Stephen Truscott had made a date with her. He asked her to be strictly confidential about it, and said he wanted to take her to the bush to see Farmer Lawson's new calves. The very bush where Lynn was raped and murdered. There were no calves in that bush.
Stephen would never make a date with Jocelyn. He likes Karen. Besides, he's way too shy.
Steve was in the bush with Lynn.
Why is Butch saying that stuff about Steve and Lynn?
Butch George is a bit rough, isn't he?
Butchie wouldn't hurt a fly. He just gets confused, that's all. I don't think he knows what he's saying. They don't believe him, do they?
On the afternoon of Friday, June 12th, we received information from the officials of the Attorney General's laboratory. After their examination of the stomach contents, it was their opinion that the meal had been ingested not more than 2 hours prior to her death. Further, the contents of the stomach were identified as similar to the meal which had been served to her Tuesday evening. Officers were dispatched to the Truscott residence, where they executed a search warrant and made other important discoveries. On the clothesline in the cellar were a pair of freshly laundered red trousers. No other laundry was on the line.
I did the laundry on Wednesday morning. I do laundry 2 or 3 times a week. I have 4 children and a lot of dirty clothes and washing to do. I dried the laundry in a Westinghouse dryer, but when I took them out, the bands and the pockets were still damp, so I threw them over the line in the basement.
There was a tear in the back of the trousers. This tear corresponded with an injury on Truscott's leg, which was consistent with being made about 2 days before and appeared to have been cut by a barb-on-the-wire fence around the area where the body was found.
He ripped those pants on his brother's bicycle. It was Bill's bike. It's a juvenile-sized bike, too small for Stephen.
Chlorophyll stains were detected on both knees, even after being laundered.
It was just boy dirt. Why is he saying this? What is he getting at, Stephen? What's going on?
I don't know, Mom. I'm just trying to help them.
He was very helpful, always so pleasing.
Why do they keep questioning Stephen?
They must know something we don't know.
Common sense, which plays such an important part in any investigation, indicated to us that Stephen's tale about a mysterious motorist was nothing but a desperate alibi. A heinous crime was uncovered in that bush near Clinton, Ontario. It was not the type of crime an investigator would automatically attribute to a 14-year-old boy. But whether the person is 14 or 40, the investigator must determine the truth.
I'm Bob Lawson. On Friday night after supper, I was haying because it looked like rain might finally come. I let Steve ride with me on the tractor, but when I was done the haying, I made him get off. For safety reasons. He sat on the rock there. When I came back from making the rounds, Steve was gone. I figured he'd gone home. Lynn's death has hit hard with all the kids. It's changed their lives.
I was just leaving Bob Lawson's place. I was at the barn gate when a provincial police car pulled up alongside me.
Hey, Truscott, get in the car. We want you to read over your statement.
Of course I trusted them. When you're 14 years old, you look up to the police.
Of course you do. We have to put our trust in the police. Otherwise, what have we?
By 9:30, Steve still wasn't home. I was frantic. Portland Harper had been killed. I didn't know what to think. I went out looking for him. I asked Bob Lawson, and he said Steve had been there earlier, but not for a couple of hours. And then some children said the police had taken him away. Finally, Dan found him in the guardhouse. They'd already been questioning him for over 2 hours without telling us.
Dad, they're saying I murdered Lynn. They're saying I'm a liar.
Do you, Stephen? I need to ask you. Did you do anything to that little girl?
No, Dad, I didn't.
What are you doing with my son? What's going on?
The father arrived in a belligerent manner, asking why Stephen had been picked up. I told him some suspicion was being directed against the boy, and we would like to have a medical examination of him.
All right, if it's gotta be done, Stephen got nothing to hide.
The examination was made by 2 doctors, the base medical doctor, Dr. Brooks, as well as the Truscott family doctor, Dr. John Addison.
Dr. Addison was the doctor in Clinton. He brought half the county into the world. He'd stitched up my chin after I fell off my bike and took my tonsils out.
If you lived in Clinton, you didn't disagree with Dr. Addison.
He was in the same social circle as the officers from the base.
Dr. Addison examined the boy and offered to speak to him, see if he could find anything out. In his opinion, the boy didn't behave like a boy in his position should behave, didn't act like a normal boy. More importantly, his examination resulted in the discovery of the lesions the size of a quarter on his penis that could only have been caused by raping the young girl. Here was incriminating evidence. The pieces were coming together. At 3 a.m. Saturday morning, we charged Stephen Truscott with the murder of Lynn Harper and landed him in the Goldrich County Jail.
Police hold 14-year-old boy over slaying of a girl. Charge follows 36 hours prop into laying death.
Who have they charged?
A boy from the base, school chum of fleeing son of non-commissioned officer.
What?
His name is Truscott.
Not Stephen.
Stephen Truscott, that's right.
Do you know him?
Of course I know him. You remember him from the...
Did you hear that?
What if?
Sarah knows this boy.
They've got the wrong person.
What makes you say that?
He's in my class. He sits 2 rows over. He's nice. Everybody likes him. He's not a murderer.
Have you ever talked to him?
Of course I talk to him. He's around all the time. When we built that fort last year, remember? He was helping. And he was at a party I went to once.
Did he ever touch you?
No, what are you talking about?
I told you it was a mistake busing these kids to the base.
Don't stretch this all out of proportion. He's the last person to have seen the girl, so he's likely suspect, but he's not deemed guilty yet.
He didn't do it.
Well, they must have some strong evidence if they've charged him.
I kept thinking that they had made a horrible mistake and they would find who really did it. Stephen would come back to class and I would still catch glimpses of him through the fingers in my right hand.
I felt such relief that they had caught the person who had done it.
At first, the police came around and asked questions of us all, and you try to tell them what you know, but they kind of scare you into talking more. And then the next thing you know, your good buddy is charged with murder, and you can't help thinking, was it something I said that made them think he's guilty?
The very same day they charged Stephen with rape and murder, they buried Lynn in her Girl Guide uniform. Trudy and I rode to the church on our bikes, just to be there. We watched a ways off so we wouldn't bother anyone.
Shall claim of their causes to grieve, and make our courage faint and fall. Nay, let us faith and hope receive. The rose still grows beyond the wall.
The Girl Guides made a guard of honor on either side of the walkway as they brought out the coffin. I went home and cried into my pillow for about 2 hours. I couldn't think of anything sadder in the whole world. I still can't think of anything sadder.
We had to get a lawyer. Friends referred us to Frank Donnelly, one of the top lawyers in Huron County. Mr. Donnelly was very reassuring to Dan and I. He told us that there was no way that they would find a 14-year-old boy guilty. The evidence just wasn't there. It was all circumstantial. Mr. Donnelly was confident, and so we were confident.
The first thing the court has to determine was whether Stephen was mentally fit. 2 psychiatrists said he was. Then the judge ruled that for the good of the community and the good of the child, Truscott would be tried in an adult rather than juvenile court. Finally, a court date was set for mid-September.
That summer on our way to the beach in Goderich, we'd drive past the jail. The big old stone building looked so creepy. A place for drunks and thieves and the Black Donnellys. I'd think of Stephen being there, locked up behind bars, and feel kind of sick. I planned on writing him, telling him I believed in his innocence, thinking he'd love me for it when he was released. But I never did write those letters.
I had big arguments with my dad. I didn't want to testify at the trial, but he said I had to. I had no choice about it. He was an officer, and you didn't really cross him too much.
Of course, I was surprised they charged the boy. He'd always seemed perfectly nice. But you never know with people. It did make me think about what kind of parents would bring up a boy like that. It was a good thing when they had the Truscotts leave, better for all involved. I mean, an officer's daughter had been murdered and raped by the son of a non-commissioned officer. The lines were clearly drawn. Some referred to it as a battle of the ranks. I remember the day they escorted them off base. Everyone standing on their walkways, watching them go. The party lines were hopping that day, I can tell you.
Hardly any time after Stephen was charged, we got the news that we were going to have to move off base. Dan was being transferred to Ottawa. I wasn't about to leave Stephen to fend for himself, all alone. We had to keep the family together as best as we could, so we got a little trail in Godrich, and I stayed there with the kids, and Dan would drive down from Ottawa every weekend. It wasn't ideal, of course, but we made do. We just did what we had to.
I heard that Stephen's father, Dan, was having an affair with some woman in a trailer in Godrich. I thought, well, that's it. That's the kind of parents who bring up a murderer.
The gossip mill ran on over time. It was what folks talked about when they ran into each other at the store, at parties, in their homes. Then on September 16th, 1959, the trial of Stephen Truscott began.
Place the prisoner in the prisoner's box.
Justice Robert Ferguson was the presiding judge.
You stand by the name of Stephen Murray Truscott. That Stephen Murray Truscott, or about the 9th day of June 1959 at the township of Turkersmith in the county of Horn, did unlawfully murder Lynn Harbour. Open this indictment. How do you play? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
You'll be fine, Stephen. You just stay strong.
12 men from the area were chosen as jury members. There was a barber and a grocer, a garage mechanic, the milkman, the man from Blythe who fixed TVs. There was the man who ran a bowling alley and a factory worker, and 5 farmers.
I told a lawyer that I thought it would be a good idea to have some women on the jury, preferably some with teenage sons. But Mr. Donnelly said he didn't agree with it. He said women are too emotional.
Gentlemen of the jury, you have been sworn in this case and are therefore now seized with it. This young lad that we are about to try is charged with murder, which is the most serious offense known to our law. The criminal code directs me to see that you are kept together during the course of this trial. Now, unfortunately for you, that means you will not be allowed to go home or that sort of thing until the trial is finished.
My dad was on the jury. My mom had to do all the work around the shop and keep things going. She wasn't allowed to speak with him the whole time the trial was on. On Sundays, she'd go to the Duke of Bedford in Godrich and take her meals there, just to be able to see him. Mom was really worried about Dad because he had diabetes.
Now, if you've heard any gossip about this case, as I am sure you have, please dismiss that from your mind now, because we can't try this case on newspaper comments or rumors we hear in the community. You try this case in accordance with the evidence heard in this courtroom.
Of course, my dad heard all about the case, but he wasn't there. He was waiting to do the right thing.
They were good men, hard-working family men who took their job seriously.
For the duration of the trial, all the newspapers, television, and radio people were barred from reporting because Stephen was still a child. So most of what I heard was from kids who were there or from folks who just seemed to know what was going on.
Your lordship, ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen of the jury, it is my duty as the counsel for the Crown to outline the nature of the Crown's case. On Tuesday, June 9th, Lynn Harper, whom the accused is charged with murdering, walked out of the house after the supper hour. That was the last her parents ever saw her alive. There are 61 citizens who may be called on behalf of the Crown. You will hear from a provincial pathologist who did a post-mortem on the girl's body, and he will give you an opinion on the time of death. You will hear from one who may be a very important witness in your estimation, Jocelyn Gadet. She is a girl from the same grade, and she will tell you of arrangements she made with Stephen Truscott to go to the same bush where the body was found. You will hear from an Arnold George, also known as Butch George, who was a close chum of Stephen, and he was looking out for him, and he will relate without success. You will hear from no Crown witnesses who ever saw Stephen and Lynn. I have no witnesses who ever saw them north of the bush. You will hear of a statement taken from the accused by Inspector Graham and one of the other policemen, signed by him.
Mr. Hayes,
I don't intend to say anything about it.
you shouldn't have said anything at all.
Even the fact that it was taken?
I may have to discharge this jury and start over again. You shouldn't do that, you know.
My dad and the other jury members didn't know what to make of the statement Mr. Hayes was referring to, but it sounded an awful lot like Stephen Truscott made some kind of confession that they didn't let the jury hear about.
Now I will call my first witness.
Corporal Ernestine was the identification officer who gathered the evidence where they found the body. He had pictures of scuff marks found in the dirt by Lynn Harper's left foot. Mr. Hayes later made a point of matching the scuff marks to the shoes Stephen Truscott wore. He showed pictures of the bicycle marks made in the dirt near the crime scene, with marks similar to the treads on Stephen Truscott's bike.
His green racer with the streamers.
And there was pictures taken from the bridge from where Stephen said he was standing when he saw the car pick up Lynn Harper. With a car backing up like that, Stephen Truscott had said he could see the numbers on the license plate, and it was pretty obvious from the picture that you would never be able to read numbers from that distance.
But why would Stephen lie about that?
And then there's Dr. Peniston.
Dr. John Peniston.
Dr. Peniston had been to school in England, and he had several degrees in internal medicine and pathology.
The stomach, under normal conditions, proceeds with the digestion of food as it is digested under the stomach empties through the duodenum into the small intestine. This process is normally completed within 2 hours.
Dr. Peniston talked about examining the body in the bush and the violence done to it. Awful words for my dad to hear. He was sure that terrible things were done to this poor girl.
I have to bear in mind here that the food appeared to have been bloated and swallowed without a proper chewing, which would tend to slow down the digestion and the emptying of the stomach. If it had been normally chewed, well chewed, I would conclude that it had not been there for more than an hour. I would, however, make an allowance for the poor chewing and give my opinion that the food has not been there in the stomach for more than 2 hours.
Could it have been for a lesser time?
It could certainly, sir, have been for a lesser time.
On the basis that Miss Harper has said Lynn finished her meal at 5:45, sir, would you put the time of death at
As prior to 7:45.
as early as?
Probably between 7 and 7:45.
That's the exact time she was with Stephen.
A lot of testimony came from kids, some as young as 10 years old. Richard Gelatley told the jury that he passed Stephen and Lynn near the school when he was going home to get his swimming trunks. But Philip Burns said when he came along the road just a few minutes later, he didn't see them.
Gordy Logan saw Steve go across the bridge with Lynn and then come back a few minutes later.
Tom Gillette was down by the river and didn't see him. But Alan and Dougie Oates did.
Paul Desjardins said he saw Stephen hanging around the bush on his bike.
Brian Glover was on the road and never saw Stephen at all.
There were so many kids testifying. Seemed like everyone in my class was there. Who saw who where? I didn't know who to believe.
Jocelyn Gadet, last spring were you in the same grade, 7 at school, as Lynn Harper and Stephen Truscott?
Yes, sir.
And on Monday, June 8th, Jocelyn, did you have a conversation at school with Stephen Truscott?
Yes, sir.
Will you tell what that conversation was, please?
Well, on Sunday, I had gone to Bob Lawson's farm and I had seen a calf there. And I mentioned that to Steve on Monday, and he asked me if I wanted to go see 2 newborn baby calves. And I said yes. And then he asked me if I could make it on Tuesday, and I said I would try. And then on Tuesday, I said I'd meet him if I could on the right-hand side of the county road, just outside of the fence of the woods. And he kept on telling me not to tell anyone because Bob didn't like a whole bunch of kids on his property.
We're always running around Bob's farm. I never heard of him minding.
And when were you to go?
At 6 o'clock on Tuesday.
Now that is Tuesday, June 9th?
Yes, sir. He came to my house at 6:10. I didn't answer the door. My brother did. And Stephen asked me if I had any homework. And I said we had our English test on Wednesday. And when he was getting on his bike to go away, I said I told him I didn't think I was going to be able to make it, but I would try because we were just starting supper.
I thought Jocelyn was just showing off when she was talking before, but she's saying all this under oath. She's sworn to tell the truth.
And then after supper, about 6:20 or 6:30, I went over to Bob Lawson's farm to see if Stephen was there.
And how long did you stay there, Jocelyn?
I don't know.
I see. And after you left, where did you go?
Well, to see if Stephen was at the meeting place on the right-hand side of the county road, just outside the fence by the woods. I went 3/4 the way in, and I shouted Stephen's name.
And did you see any sign of Stephen?
No, sir.
If Jocelyn was walking up and down the county road looking for Steve and didn't see him, where was he?
It became clear to everyone that boy must have taken Lynn off the road into the bush.
I now call Arnold George.
I went down to the river going to number 8 highway, and by the woods there I saw Jocelyn Gadet, and I asked her if she had seen Steve. It was about 20 minutes after 7. I cut down along the river there to the swimming hole, and I went swimming with these boys. At 8:30, I went home.
Had you seen Stephen at any time until you started for home?
No.
Hey, wait a minute. Butch said before he did see Stephen crossing the bridge with Lynn. I know he did.
Did you see him on your way home?
No.
And when you got to the base, where did you go?
I went around the school and down to Steve's place.
And was Stephen there?
I asked him where he had been that night, and he said down at the river, and I said, I heard that you had given Lynn a ride down to the river, and he said, yeah, she wanted to lift down to the number 8 highway, and I said, I heard you were in the bush with her, and he said, no, we were on the side of the road looking for a cow and a calf, and I said, why do you want to know for? And he said, skip it, let's play ball.
Why does Butch keep changing his story?
He lied before the body was found to protect his friend Stephen, but Once things got serious, the boy told the truth.
I guess.
He's got to be guilty.
What do you mean?
There's just too much at stake.
I felt like the whole world was crazy. That soon the stupid trial would be over and we'd just go back to the way things were.
Stephen Truscott looked guilty. My dad kept looking over at him during the trial, seeing how he was reacting. Stephen Truscott just didn't act right, the way someone in his circumstances should.
What does a guilty person look like? How should an innocent person look? Is it in his eyes?
Mr. Donnelly was supposed to be a good lawyer, but he was just never able to make a case for Stephen. He has kids saying they saw Stephen cross the bridge with Lynn Harper, but then Mr. Hayes came in and made all their times fudgy, or he would say that they couldn't have seen what they said they saw, so they kind of ruled out. And then there was all the talk about the sores on Stephen Truscott's privates. Mr. Hayes had his expert, and Mr. Donnelly had his. So who do you believe? The doctor you know by reputation, or some outsider that comes in and you've never seen Stephen Truscott before?
Who do you believe?
The trial took 15 days. After all the witnesses and lawyers had their say, the judge made his final charge to the jury.
The circumstances of this killing of this little girl are shocking, revolting in the extreme. One would surmise that only a monster could be guilty of such a killing. The accused is just a lad of a little more than 14 years. You must not permit his youth nor the revolting nature of the facts in any way to prevent you from bringing in a verdict in accordance with your conscience.
Justice Ferguson talked for about 4 hours going over the evidence.
Dr. Peniston concluded, having regard to the food that he found in her stomach, that she had died before 7:45.
He went on to say,
Richard Gallatley and Philip Barnes left the swimming hole at the same time. Gallatley on a bicycle and Philip Barnes walking. Gallatley says he passed Stephen and Lynn riding towards the highway. Philip Barnes, plodding along behind him on foot, says he did not. Where did Stephen and Lynn disappear to? That is entirely for you to say. It is not for me to say.
the judge seemed to be guiding them towards one conclusion.
The boy told the police he took her down to number 8 highway and she got in a car. The police took Stephen down to the bridge and he pointed to the spot where he was standing on the bridge. And they took photos to demonstrate that not only was it not possible to see numbers on a license plate, but you couldn't distinguish a license plate at 1,300 feet, and therefore the story told by the accused is a fabrication.
Finally, he handed it over to the jury.
You may bring in a verdict of not guilty, or you may bring in a verdict of guilty as charged. There is no other verdict open to you in this case on this evidence. You are now free to retire, gentlemen, and consider your verdict.
Mr. Donnelly vehemently protested several points the judge had made. The judge had to call the jury back 4 times to clarify what he said. So it was after 8 o'clock when the jury was finally let to deliberate. They talked for almost 3 hours.
At 10:45 p.m., they returned.
Gentlemen of the jury, have you agreed upon your verdict?
Yes, my lord.
Do you find the prisoner at the bridge guilty or not guilty?
We find the defendant guilty as charged with a plea for mercy.
Guilty?
He said they wouldn't find him guilty. How could this happen?
Mom,
Guilty?
Stand up. Stephen Murray Truscott, have you anything to say why the sentence of this court should not be passed upon you according to law?
no, no, your lordship.
Stephen Murray Truscott, I have no alternative but to pass the following sentence on you. You'll be taken from here to the place from whence you came, and there be kept in close confinement until Tuesday, the 8th day of December, 1959. And upon that day and date, you'll be taken to the place of execution, and that you be hanged by the neck until you are dead. And may the Lord have mercy on your soul.
In God rich town, the sun abates, December is coming, and everyone's wait.
I know it must be difficult for you to believe, Sarah, especially when he was someone you know, but nonetheless, for every man who's committed murder, there is someone saying, but he was such a nice boy.
In a small stark room, on a small hard bed, there is a small pale boy who is not quite dead.
I testify, all right. Those lawyers came at me. They twisted my words. I felt like crying. That's not what I meant. But you can't.
The cell is lonely, the cell is cold. October is young, but the boy is old.
Stephen Truscott didn't even have the decency to testify on his own behalf. When I heard that guilty verdict, I thought, thank God the jury did the right thing. They got the little monster.
Too old to cringe and too old to cry. Though young, but never too young to die.
I woke up to the sound of hammering outside the jail. I was sure they were building a scaffolding. That hammering went on all morning.
We'll appeal, Stephen. Mr. Donnelly says we have a good chance.
The Ontario court heard the appeal and unanimously upheld the conviction.
The law is clear. It says we must. And in this country, the law is just.
My father keeps saying he's guilty. So does my mother, and my uncle, and all my cousins. So I keep my mouth shut, but he was my friend.
There's nothing to do anymore. I don't want to go swimming in the river or hang out at the school grounds after supper. The other night, I told my mom I was going to go out on my bike for...
Oh, no, you won't. It's not safe out there.
Tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye. A child does murder, a child must die.
So Pierre Baudin's written a poem questioning the death sentence for a 14-year-old. How would he feel if one of his daughters was raped and murdered?
So muffle the drums and beat them slow, mute the strings and play them low. Sing a lament and sing it well, but not for the boy in the cold dark cell.
Enough!
Diefenbaker commuted Truscott sentence to life in prison.
Thank God! Stephen won't hang.
It's over now. It's done. Time to move on.
I want to learn how to fly. Maybe be a pilot one day.
Sarah, what do you think? Is Stephen guilty?
He is guilty. May the Lord have mercy on us all. The same boy who won the senior athletic award, who went fishing with his grandfather in the summer, who giggled when some kid said something stupid in class, could also be a murderer? Who could be trusted? Who else was pretending to be nice?
They've made a mistake, Sarah.
Maybe he just wanted to show Lynn a calf in the bush and things got out of hand.
Out of hand? Who told you that?
All the police, all the Air Force, Dr. Addison, Dr. Brooks, the judge, 12 jury members, all say he's guilty.
I thought you liked him.
I didn't like him that much.
Liar, he's all you ever talked about for this whole entire year. You know he wouldn't hurt anyone.
He probably didn't mean to strangle her. He just snapped.
So you just wanted to do it with her? Stephen and Lynn?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Do you even know what rape is?
Sort of. That's sick.
Stephen wouldn't do that. And if you can't believe him, just forget it. Forget it.
I became afraid of the dark. The woods that we used to play in became a place of danger and harm. I wouldn't let my mother drive down the county road. I never rode my bike there, over the bridge, past the river and the bush. I stayed at home more, didn't hang out with my friends much. That September, I started high school in Clinton. I avoided the kids I knew from the base. Left that all behind.
Sarah, stand up straight and fix your hair. My goodness, these young kids hardly know how to use a comb. Can I get you some coffee?
Yes, please.
Writing for Chatelaine? That's certainly something.
Sarah, I'm writing a story about Stephen Truscott.
What about him?
I'm curious how a 14-year-old boy came to be sentenced to hang.
Everyone knew that boy was guilty.
Did you know him?
She didn't have anything to do with those kids from the base.
But you went to school there.
Yes.
And he was in your class.
Yes.
She wasn't even there that night. I almost was, though. I was supposed to pick up some strawberries with a friend, and I would have gone right down that county road.
I'm trying to get an impression of what Stephen Truscott was like.
I didn't really know him.
Do you think he's guilty of murdering Lynn Harper?
He's guilty of sin.
Sarah?
Yeah, I do.
Did you think he was guilty when you first heard he was charged?
I wasn't sure.
What made you change your mind?
When kids were talking about him and Lynn being in the bush.
What were they saying?
That Stephen was looking for a girl to take into the bush and Lynn wanted to go.
Had Stephen taken other girls there?
Not that I knew of, but Jocelyn Godet said all that about him.
Is Jocelyn a friend of yours?
No.
Is she someone that you would believe to tell the truth?
She was sworn.
Do you think of Jocelyn as someone who likes attention?
Are you implying she perjured herself?
And what about Arnold George, Sarah? Was he someone that you would trust to tell the truth?
Butch, I think he tried to tell the truth.
Interesting way of putting it. Why do you think they picked Jocelyn and Butch as their star witnesses?
I don't know.
Sarah, if you believe that Stephen is guilty, do you look back at how he acted, behaved, and think, yes, now I see it? Do you see any signs of what you observed that he had a violent nature, that he could have done this to Lynn?
He was very competitive in sports, and I heard he read pornographic magazines.
You heard from who?
I don't want to say.
Someone who knew the boy well, had been to his house, had seen the magazines with their own eyes?
It was someone whose son went to high school with Stephen Truscott.
Stephen Truscott never even got to high school.
What's your angle here on your story, Miss Labordez?
The facts aren't adding up. Why was that boy not tried in a juvenile court? Why was there a change of venue?
What?
Why didn't they move to the community, to a more community that wasn't so involved, to ensure a more impartial jury?
The jury was impartial.
Even if Stephen Truscott was guilty, then he needed some kind of psychiatric help, not a death sentence.
If you do the crime, you pay for it.
He's a 14-year-old boy. You can't imagine what his parents are going through.
The Truscotts? What about the Harpers?
What the Harpers have had to endure is an incomparable tragedy. But we have a boy who is still living, and we have to do the right thing by him. Thank you very much for your time. If there is anything you think of later, Sarah.
Miss Labordez?
Yes.
Have you seen Steve?
I have. He's doing as well as can be expected, if that's what you want to know.
If you see him, ask him. How could he have done that to Lynn? Ask that from me, okay? How could he have done that?
Isabelle Libardes came around the farm. She stood outside in the cold, asked her why she wanted to write about Stephen.
Mr. Lawson, I come from a family of lawyers and doctors, so, well, you're a farmer and you might sit around talking about farming. In my family, we talked about murders.
All right.
This is not a guilty boy.
That woman is going to cause nothing but trouble.
Whenever kids talked about Stephen, I concentrated on cracks in the concrete. When I saw articles in the newspaper, I turned the page. Folks were waiting for the Chatelaine article to come out, but it never did. I'm here to pick up my mom's order.
Surely more of you kids could stick up for him in some way.
I told you I don't want to talk about it. 3 sliced whites and a cake?
What was he like at school?
There are a lot more kids who know him better than me.
The children from base have been told not to talk to me.
They have?
All military personnel and their families have been forbidden to speak to me. It's absolutely ridiculous. You know Gordon Logan? He testified for Stephen at his trial. His mother told me her husband could get a black mark on his record for discussing the case.
Is this still for the big Chatelaine story?
I'm writing a book.
You're joking. Who would want to read that? He's a maniac. He was the only person with her when she was killed. That's a fact.
Give me 2 minutes to change your mind.
I just came in here to pick up some bread.
The bread will keep for 2 minutes. Inspector Graham pinned his whole case on the time of death set by Dr. Peniston. Peniston based that time by looking at her stomach contents in a glass jar under the light of an ordinary light bulb. Lynn's parents listed what she had for dinner that night. Peniston claimed he found the exact foods in her stomach, but in fact what he found changed 4 times in 4 different statements. And you can't pin that time of death with that kind of exactitude. You just can't. I've got many doctors who agree with me on that.
How do you know all of this?
I've read the trial transcripts. I've read the preliminary trial transcripts. I've read the appeal. I've cross-referenced, taken notes. I've talked to everyone I can around here. And doctors, lawyers, I know this case better than any jury possibly could.
What about the bike tires? They found those marks in the dirt that matched Steve's bike.
Those marks could have been made by any number of bicycles. And they certainly were not made at the time of Lynn Harper's death. This area was in the middle of a heat wave, for God's sake. It hadn't rained since May. The ground was as hard and dry as can be. Those marks in the earth had been made from some time before.
Why did he lie about seeing Lynn Harper get into a car? He said he could read the license plate numbers from the bridge all the way to number 8 highway. Nobody has eyes that good.
Stephen never said he could read the numbers on the license plate. He said he might have seen a yellow license plate. If you stand on the bridge and the light is right, you most certainly can see a color of a license plate from that distance.
And the footprints he left by the body?
What you are referring to are 2 mounds of earth pushed back like this, below the girl's feet at an angle that way. They were assumed to be caused by the rapist's feet when he was raping her. Her legs were like this.
That's disgusting.
I know this is hard to listen to, but we have to look at the facts. An innocent boy is in prison.
There's nothing I can do about it.
Your friend Trudy tells me that you used to like Stephen, was friendly with him. Why did you tell me differently?
I'm not responsible, okay? I didn't do anything wrong. Just leave me alone, all right?
My father spoke to Isabelle Libardes. Dad told her that the trial began and he was sure Stephen Truscott was guilty, but he didn't form an opinion until the end. I guess he didn't like hearing that Dad didn't like her much. What did he call her? Accusatory?
Mrs. Libardes sent her book to every publisher in the country, and they all turned it down, scared of label. She was taken off the establishment, and folks didn't do that then, especially not women.
What'll we do? They say when he's 18, they'll send him to Kingston. He'll be photographed and given a number that'll follow him his whole life. He'll be in a penitentiary with hard criminals.
Dot, I'll never give up on this until we have what we all want. Stephen free and completely cleared.
It took Isabelle Libardes 6 years, but she got her book published all right. And 15,000 copies of the trial of Stephen Truscott were sold across the country within a week.
Suddenly it was everywhere. Even people in London, England were reading that book. It felt strange. What had been just our story, or Stephen and Lynn's, was now everyone's to talk about.
The book is a terrible revolution of function arrogance, the pretense and the ritualistic nonsense which reflect the Canadian courtroom. Well, I guess that's going to stir things up again.
By that time, Mr. Graham was assistant commissioner of the OPP. I don't think he took too kindly to Miss Libardes.
So, this book appears on the market. The author of the book says she checked the evidence very thoroughly and found no evidence against Stephen at all. She impugned everybody connected with the case. The judge, she said, had improperly directed the jury.
The chapter on the judge's charge to the jury was written 6 times with the greatest of care. I related the charge to the evidence that he quoted the evidence he left out. I went back to the transcripts about 25 times to read the actual evidence given by witnesses he was referring to, and the judge was so frequently inaccurate that it was shocking.
The defense counsel, she said, was quite inept and disinterested. As a matter of fact, the defense was appointed a superior court judge the day following the sentence, and I think he was more interested in going out in a blaze of glory by having this boy acquitted than in her version.
Unlike the Crown, defense attorney Frank Donnelly didn't have a large staff. No police or RCAF officers to help him. He had Stephen's father, Dan, trying to gather evidence in support of his son. Hardly a fair situation.
Crown counsel, she said, was antagonistic, vindictive, and interested only in securing a conviction. Wasn't interested in the cause of justice at all. And the police, well, I am not going into what she said about them.
From the moment the police came upon Stephen Truscott as a suspect, they never seriously looked at anyone else. Every witness, every clue, every fact that did not support the case against Stephen was overlooked or ignored.
The trial of Stephen Truscott put Clinton on the map. Of course, folks were divided about whether that was a good thing.
12 good men still convinced they were right. Clinton, the jurors, the trial of Stephen Truscott held a picnic after they found a 14-year-old boy guilty.
A picnic?
Of brutal rape and murder of a 12-year-old girl?
The jurors all got to know each other pretty well over the trial and wanted to get their families to get together socially. They didn't mean any harm by it. It wasn't a victory celebration. It was just a get-together.
One of the jurors even said that he thought Stephen had foreign blood, and that affected his decision. They quoted him in the paper.
No one said anything like that. Miss Labordez, the papers, they misquoted the jurors, twisted their words, made them look like uneducated hicks. It was just rubbish.
She just waltzed in here and made assumptions about all people living in the Huron County. She doesn't know the whole story.
Dad was blind then because of the diabetes. He would be home alone and reporters would call him at all hours and say the most terrible things to him, blaming him. He was very upset and scared.
I only wrote what people told me. If they didn't want to be quoted that way, they shouldn't have said those words.
Isabelle Labordier should be charged with public mischief for writing this book. She has disturbed the emotions of everyone in Canada with her false allegations. They're talking about a government inquiry. This could lead to the destruction of the judicial system.
Okay, all right now. Let's just calm down about this.
Am I going to get a new trial?
Don't expect a miracle. It's not going to happen overnight. There may be hard battles ahead. Just remember, it's better to walk out an innocent man a year from now than to be paroled, still guilty today.
These people are all taking one woman's side on this. She's not a lawyer or any kind of expert. She's just a city lady trying to cash in on a tragedy and make some money.
I certainly didn't start out to make money on it. I simply felt there was a boy who needed help. But if I do, that's fine. I'm a widow with a family to support. And there's years of writing this book. I wonder if they'd be saying that if I were a man.
I had such confidence when Isabel's book was published. Things would change for Stephen. I had real hope. Maybe he'd be home for Christmas this year.
Are you responsible for this?
Sorry?
Are you responsible for this article?
Patricia Clark wrote the article, but yes, I prove it. May I ask you who you're...
Did you even read it? How can she possibly say the trial wasn't fair because some Toronto woman has written a book? I would have thought that the United Church Observer, of all the journalistic crap out there, would have the decency.
I'm sorry, if you don't prove that, but we'll try to give some freedom in the areas. I already feel strongly about it. Patricia feels that Mr. Burdes has made very good case for the boy Innocent. However, if you would like to write a letter...
Innocence! That boy says he gave Lynn a ride on his bicycle to the Seaforth Highway, but she never got there. That boy took away her life, and now they want to let him off? What about Lynn in all of this? What about my daughter? It's as if she's been murdered again, opening the wounds all over. When will it end?
Mr. Harbour, I'm sorry. I had no idea.
How dare you give credence to that book? There was no injustice done to Stephen Truscott at the trial. I was there. It was my daughter who suffered injustice of the worst kind. We are just beginning to have a half-normal life. I want you to retract that article.
There is no doubt that you and your family lived through an indescribable tragedy. Perhaps the point to consider, if you are able, is that we can reclaim the life of your daughter. Perhaps we can reclaim something, but perhaps we can do something to claim the second.
So?
So what?
What do you think now, Sarah?
That book is It's totally biased.
How?
She makes everyone who thought Stephen was guilty sound like an idiot.
Like who?
I don't know. I don't have the book memorized.
You haven't even read it, have you?
I don't want to read it, all right?
So you're just gonna get all your facts from what people are saying? Oh wow, that's really smart. No wonder Stephen is still behind bars. In an adult prison with those creeps. Have you even thought for 1 second what it's like for him in there?
They'll prove Isabella Verde is wrong. You mark my words, it will blow away like dust.
But it didn't.
Parliament the death penalty today.
You know, I bet the NDP are behind this. They're supporting this Lobarde's woman.
Can you pass
A
me
lot
the
of
peas?
people, the boys is innocent.
He's not a boy anymore. What if they let him out and he kills again?
Anyone else want some?
I'm just saying that people feel like we came very close to hang 14 years old boy, guilty or not guilty.
What deterrent will he have if they abolish the death penalty?
Life in prison is no party either.
I'm just gonna finish them off.
Right, and then the taxpayers will have to pay the bills while those criminals get pampered in prison.
What if we did make mistake?
A
You
mistake?
don't really believe.
I'm just saying, what if?
What if we made a mistake? The whole thing a mistake? All those people wrong? Could that be possible?
The freedom of all men is diminished when the rights of one man are denied. John F. Kennedy said that.
What about my right to a normal life? I didn't ask for any of this. When my dad suggested a university the other side of the country, I leapt at the chance to get out of here. I decided to take English literature, escape into the world of fiction, except the real world kept butting in.
You're from Clinton, Ontario?
Closer to Loudonsboro, really.
Wow, it must be strange to have all that happen in Clinton.
What?
The whole Stephen Truscott thing.
Actually, it was in Tuckersmith Township. Jim from Creative Writing.
So, my uncle knows a guy who lived on the base. Says there was a cover-up. Everyone was told not to discuss the case. There was a rumor going around that someone in the Air Force was a suspect, and the military didn't want the base to get a bad name.
Really?
Did you know they're shooting him up with LSD?
Who?
Truscott, up at the prison. The psychiatrists want to make him confess.
That's awful. Even if he
They
is.
probably show him dirty pictures to see how he reacts. He can't have made a confession or we all know about it. Meanwhile, this Air Force pervert goes free as a bird.
I'd be at a poetry reading and the woman sitting behind me would say,
That book changed my life. I can never trust anyone again. Not the police, judges, no one. He even was betrayed by his family doctor.
Dr. Addison?
He should have been interrogating Stephen.
Dr. Addison is a really good doctor.
He's your doctor?
Yes. Was. No.
My God.
What's wrong with that?
Well,
It was the mid-60s and kids were talking about the Vietnam War, Quebec nationalism, civil rights, women's rights, abortion. Everyone seemed to have big opinions. I'd be in the cafeteria eating my lunch and...
Arnold George changed his story so many times that.
Yeah, nice friend.
But those guys who saw Stephen and Lynn cross the bridge together, Jordan Logan, Dougie Oates,
The kid's looking for turtles.
never changed the story once. Said the same thing, but even before they knew she'd been murdered.
I'd go to sleep at night and I couldn't stop the opinions from intruding.
How could he have reached those branches? The ones covering her body. He'd have to be about 6 feet tall.
What happened to that big piece of cloth that was cut out of her blouse? They never found it. That's
the
suspicious.
whole crime scene was creepy. Everything organized, her shoes placed neatly. They must have been sort of a psychopath.
I try to clear my head, go to a party, but...
Yo, you don't think he's guilty, do you?
Pardon?
That Truscott guy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You're the chick from Clinton, aren't you?
Actually, I'm from Vancouver. I've never been to Ontario. My parents are from Japan.
Why do you think they never found Lynn's locket?
They count the area for days.
Then a little girl finds it hanging over the fence. Somebody must have put it there.
Steve couldn't possibly done that. He was in jail by then.
And why was there hardly any blood when her clothes were splattered?
For God's sake, stop! Can you hear yourselves?
Sorry.
Are you okay?
You think you know, but you weren't there.
Did you know Lynn Harper?
Yes, I did. What about her? Nobody ever thinks about Lynn.
Sorry.
I knew Stephen too, but it doesn't make it easy, you know? It had to be him. Why would anybody pick her up at the highway and bring her right back to the very place she left? It doesn't make any sense. I think about him sometimes. He had a nice smile.
Parliament has referred to the case to the Supreme Court of Canada. It's become an attack on the administration of justice, all because of the uproar over this book.
I have great confidence that the Supreme Court will do the right thing and clear Stephen Truscott.
I want to testify. They'll see I'm innocent.
Don't build your hopes up. You're not out yet. You don't know. Some funny things can happen.
An August body of 9 judges, full court, reviewed the transcript and heard new evidence called by both the Crown and the defense. and it was the first time in 92 years of history that live evidence was heard of witnesses. Ordinarily, they just go by argument from lawyers, and Truscott appeared, and for the first time he
I
testified.
felt like I was being pulled in two. I didn't know what to hope for.
He was so nervous. He had the butterflies. I was a little nervous too. Stephen is like me. Our emotions don't really show outwardly. You feel them inwardly. We told him to keep his chin up. We told him how nice he looked in his new brown suit. I would be nervous too if I had to get up in front of 9 judges in a packed courthouse like that.
I thought my knees would buckle. I was so scared.
He had a hard time remembering things.
His lawyers didn't prepare him properly.
Do you recall at your trial, Mrs. Truscott, Miss Geiger gave evidence?
No, sir.
Do you recall Kenneth Geiger gives evidence?
No, I don't recall it.
Do you recall Richard Gelalti give evidence?
No, sir.
Do you recall Brian Glover give evidence?
I don't recall that name, no.
I'm wondering, frankly, Mrs. Truscott, bearing in mind and seriousness of the charge facing you, why cannot recall those people giving evidence? Mrs. Truscott, why don't you recall?
Because I've forgotten.
He didn't make a very good impression.
Dr. Halpin of New York, famous medical legal expert who investigates about 8 murders a day, said that he looked over the records and heard the evidence with regard to stomach contents, and he said it was a perfectly safe estimate of death.
I did not kill Lynn Harper.
We're very proud of Stephen. We feel just the way he does. We know he did not commit this crime. There's never been any doubt in my mind.
The Supreme Court came down with their decision,
Yes?
8-1, up his conviction.
Oh, so that's it then. We were right.
They just didn't believe his testimony, and they cited the doctors who had been there at the time rather than this new doctor. They just looked at the photographs. They couldn't see how someone else could have done it. Brought the girls back into the bush and not seen by anyone.
No one saw Stephen take her in the bush either.
Sarah, I know this whole thing has been hard on you especially, and your mother has a very strong feeling on it, of course. But the thing you've got to remember, we all make mistakes. Kids make them, and adults make them too.
I know.
You just have to find your own way. Through things sometimes.
Hello? Son, have you heard the news?
Yeah, 8-1.
Keep busy, son. We're not quitting. We'll be down to see you soon. Do you want to speak to Isabel?
She's there?
Yes. Yes, she's here.
Can I speak to Dad?
No. No, he can't come to the phone. He's taking it hard, son, but he says he'll go across the country gathering signatures if he has to. Here's Isabel.
Hello, boy. Remember the promise I made you?
Yes.
I intend to keep it. You remember that, all right?
All right.
The one dissenting judge thought there was enough errors for a new trial, but even he could not find innocence. Now, what is the cost in dollars and cents? The federal government paid out $97,000 for legal fees and witnesses. And in the terms of human tragedy, Mrs. Truscott, the mother of the boy, is living with another man. The father of the boy is under psychiatric treatment, or was at one time following this. And the little girl's mother is under psychiatric treatments. The father has been hounded by newspaper people. Lynn Harper's little brother, 8 at the time of her death, was told Lynn was hurt. And now he is suffering with a mental derangement. Now I hope when that boy is eventually released, and according to our laws, any person convicted of this crime must serve 10 years before parole. I hope he goes someplace and is able to adjust himself. And that will be the end of the case.
The Attorney General was quoted as saying the whole thing had been trial of our system of justice, and the Supreme Court had seen fit to sustain our faith and in the fairness of this system. I wasn't so sure anymore.
I'm surprised, very shocked, but we won't give up trying to prove that our son is innocent. We're standing by him.
The Supreme Court is making a mistake.
I think the whole of Huron County let loose a big sigh of relief when the Supreme Court said we were right to convict that boy, clearing us all of those charges that one made. She seemed to think we acted like some sort of a lynch mob up here.
I don't think any parent can imagine what it's like to sit in court when your son is 14 years old and hear him sentenced to hang. And I hope no parent has to go through what we have. I can never say what might have been if, or what if I have to keep going and moving forward. But I do say to those men responsible, I hope your conscience bothers you for the rest of your lives.
The judgment of the land's highest court cannot change my own personal view. It is so well known by now that I consider Stephen innocent, there's hardly any need to repeat it. Of course, I had considered the possibility that the Supreme Court might confirm Stephen's conviction, but I was still shocked. I was so hopeful. And of course, I am disappointed. But no matter what I feel, I know it is much, much worse for Stephen Truscott and his family. I believe now the terms of reference for the Supreme Court were too narrow. They felt their job was to uphold the guilty verdict unless it was proved wrong. Correct me, please, but isn't the job of courts to assume someone is not guilty until it is proven otherwise? No one has proven to me that he is guilty, and I will keep saying that until the day I die.
The Supreme Court of Canada made their decision. It was final. It wasn't even worth discussing his innocence anymore. So I moved on. I got married. My husband and I bought a house just up the road in Wingham, and we had 2 kids of our own. We never discussed the case in my household. Over the years, I'd see the odd article, something would be on TV, or I'd run into folks at a church supper, or...
Somebody said to me the other day, if Stephen Truscott came to your door and asked to come in, would you let him? And I said, of course I would. Even with kids in the house? I said, absolutely. I trust him completely. What would you do, Sarah? Now that you have kids, lock your door. He's out on parole. You know that, right?
Apparently, the pathologist Dr. Peniston wrote a letter to Graham back in 1966, around the time of the Supreme Court. Seems he had some kind of agonizing reprisal. He was much more cautious about his findings, wasn't so definite about the time of death. But the Crown made sure Peniston didn't testify, so that the letter wasn't made public for years.
Back in 1959, the night before I was to testify, Jocelyn Godet came around. She asked me to change my testimony. Asked me to change the time she had to come to the farm that night. Lynn disappeared. I guess she knew my testimony wasn't going to be lining up with hers. I said no, I wouldn't do that.
I was having coffee with a couple of fellows and a story came up. Seems one of them had known the taxi driver who used to make deliveries for Adams or Simpson out of the base back in 1959. Early one morning, and he was pretty sure it was June 10th, the day after Lynn had gone missing. He was driving down the county road and saw a man walk out of the bush with a long coat over his uniform. It was a hot day, no need for a coat. Apparently, he reported this to the authorities and was told in no uncertain terms to keep his mouth shut.
So, one night in Montreal, a number of nursing students, including Jocelyn Godet, had gathered socially in one of the girls' rooms. I was not drinking, but some of the girls were, including Jocelyn. The Stephen Truscott case was in the news at the time because it was going to be heard again in the Supreme Court of Canada. Jocelyn suddenly told us that she had been a witness at Stephen's trial and had lied on the witness stand. Jocelyn became very upset and started crying and said that she did not understand why they never looked into the person with the yellow plates. It was clear to me that Jocelyn thought he was innocent. On the eve of the hearing, I heard a radio announcement that an important witness in the Truscott case named Jocelyn Godet had been committed to a mental institution. I thought, as did our fellow students, that she had checked herself into the hospital so that she could get out of testifying.
And then one day I found myself with a 14-year-old son of my own.
Do you know Stephen Truscott? Uncle Joe says you did.
I was in the same class as him.
And then Harvard?
Yes.
We're studying about it in school. Some of the kids want to be petition.
He's out of jail now, you know. Someone told me he has a wife and kids.
But people are still thinking he's murder. That's not fair.
Lots of people think it's fair.
Seems like everyone who really know him thinks that he's innocent. How well did you know him?
Not well, but I sort of had a crush on him.
Really?
I thought he was nice.
It doesn't make sense to me. No one my age could have done all that. What do you think? Do you believe he did?
What do I believe?
All that talk about the sores, the lesions, apparently Stephen Truscott has very sensitive skin, simple as that. His wife Marlene has to be very careful what kind of soap she uses.
It's an odd saying, innocent
I
until
didn't do
proven
it.
that you did.
Let's tell the someone's innocent.
To me, it's more like who did it. They keep telling me like who did it.
Guilty.
All ridiculous.
Of course he's guilty, but he's done his time, and we should let him be.
Mom!
My 14-year-old son. A boy who got into boy trouble. Tore his pants. Was awkward. Didn't say the right things at the right time. Kept his emotions locked up. Didn't act right, as they say. Had one foot in childhood and one foot marching towards adulthood. And I felt like I was being asked what I thought, truly, for the first time.
Shall claim of that cause us to grieve, and make our courage faint and fall? Nay, Let us faith and hope receive, because the rose still grows beyond the wall.
Courage wasn't something I had in great quantity, but I thought about those things Stephen had lost. The high school dances, hanging around with his friends. He wasn't even allowed to have the athletic award he'd won. And it came to me that no one had all the answers. It was never going to be black and white. The story was always going to have shades of gray. The trust I had in the world, in authority, in doctors and lawyers, and even in my own parents, was mostly gray. One day in June, I was coming back from picking strawberries and found myself driving past the old base. The Air Force had long gone, but the houses were still there. The school looked lonely and deserted. I passed Bob Lawson's farm, and for some reason, I turned down the county road towards Highway 8. I drove past the bush and parked the car near the river. I got out, and I stood there and I looked life and death right in the face. I looked really hard and tried to imagine that terrible day and what had happened. I saw the spot where Dougie Oates and little Karen Dom had been looking for turtles and had seen Stephen and Lynn ride by.
Lynn and Steve came by on the bridge. They were riding on their bikes. Steve was pedaling, Lynn was sitting on the crossbar, and when they were coming by, I turned around and said hi, and Lynn smiled.
Me and Dougie were coming up from the river, and I saw Lynn riding on the bar of the Truscott's boys' bike. We were going home, and they were coming towards the river. Lynn and Steve looked happy.
While I stood on the bridge, a car drove past, heading towards the highway. I watched it carefully, paying particular attention to the license plate. It wasn't yellow, but it would do. As the car turned east on Highway 8, I could still make out the color of the license plate. It was white. But there was one last piece of the puzzle for me to find. Only one, but it was an important one, and it happened by accident. I was invited to a party at an old friend of mine from high school's. It was near Christmas, and she hinted at some sort of surprise. I was late getting there, my son had a hockey game, and I tried to sneak through the kitchen to drop off a plate of cookies I had made. Outside the door, there was a man standing. He looked like he was taking a little fresh air, trying to find place for quiet. I said a quick hello and tried to get past him without disturbing him too much, but he looked at me, straight on, and my heart stopped. Just like it did all those years ago in 1959 when I would steal looks at him through the cracks between my fingers. I paused for a moment and my eyes looked straight into his, and what I saw was innocence.
Mom, what do you think?
I think you should go outside and play.
On August 28, 2007, Stephen Truscott was acquitted of murder in the death of Lynn Harper. The Ontario Court of Appeal said the original conviction was a miscarriage of justice.
It was the state, through the operation of criminal justice system, that inflicted the harm on Mr. Truscott. Through no fault of his own, Mr. Truscott suffered as a result of one of those errors. His loss should be borne by the community as a whole, and not by Mr. Truscott alone.
The Honorable Sidney L. Robbins, Quebec City.
Thank you.